The goal in your life is not to figure out how to be comfortable in your mental prisons, but to realize that you have the keys to set yourself free.
So glad that you're here. We have a special guest today. I'm so excited. Bob Burg is with us. What, are you kidding me? Yeah, Bob has carved the time into his busy schedule to hang out with us because he's a pretty mesmerizing guy. And you know that that's what we're all about here on the program. So I'm going to introduce Bob real quick, and then we're going to get into some really cool questions and take a few laps in his amazing mind and see what we can learn. So Bob is a very well-known, beloved motivational speaker, trainer, consultant. He travels around the world. He's touched the lives of so many countless people, and through his books and his programs has really elevated humanity, right? He teaches how to be kind and loving and caring and empathic, and how to be mindful and how to pay attention. He really focuses on, these are my words, but he emotionally matures people. And so through his famous books, he's sold well over 1 million copies of his different books, The Go-Getter, The Go-Getter Leader, The Go-Getter Influencer. I mean, he's just got a beautiful series, and he's a very accomplished guy. And so, Bob, thanks for being on the show with us today.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Thanks for that nice introduction. I love the work you do, and it just makes a big difference for a lot of people. Thank you.
Yes, well, this is exciting because the reason that I wanted to have this show, because there's a lot of podcasts out there and there's some really great ones. And one of the reasons that I like this is because you can have like-minded people get together and strategize on what we can do to make a bigger difference, right? When we work together, so many people feel isolated. Even though we have technology and we're around other humans all the time, we feel so isolated, so rushed, so busy. And so this is a way of being able to slow down and just imagine that you're just having lunch with a couple of your buddies, and we're just talking about how to have a more fulfilling life. And so let me ask you a question. Now, you've been teaching for a long time, and what was the very first class that you started out teaching in your career?
I began, well, when I got into sales, I started, once I had worked my way up to sales manager of a company, I was, of course, always teaching sales to them, and then other people from other companies started asking me to come in and just speak to their people about sales too. And at that time I wasn't even getting paid for it. I love being an ambassador of sales, because I think when sales are done correctly, it improves the world. It creates prosperity for everyone, and brings products and services to people who otherwise would not know about them, and so forth. So I guess the first classes I was teaching were sales classes.
Yeah. And, sales is definitely a wonderful place to be able to learn how to shift from a go-getter to a go-giver, right? And so can you explain the difference for any of our audience members who haven't read your book yet, who are going to go buy your book and read it after they listen to this program? But
Sure.
Can you explain the difference between a go-getter and a go-giver, please?
Well, so here's the thing, and the titles of the book, The Go-Giver, it's a series co-authored with John David Mann, who really is a fantastic writer. He's the lead writer and storyteller. These are 3 of the 4 books in the series are parables, so they're fictional stories with a message. The basic premise of The Go-Giver is simply that shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value, immense value to others, understanding that doing that is not only a pleasant way of conducting business, but it's the most financially profitable way as well. Now, the interesting thing is, while we titled it as kind of a playoff on the term go-getter, a go-getter and a go-giver are not diametrically opposed, because a go-getter at their best is a person of action. And as you know, because you've been very, very successful in the business field first, and then, you can have a great idea, you can have fantastic intent, but without action put into the mix, nothing's going to happen. So we want people to be both go-getters and go-givers, but the focus needs to be on being a go-giver. We would say the opposite of a go-giver is a go-taker. And that's that person who kind of feels entitled, if you will, to take without having given or added value to the person, to the process, to the situation. And they tend to not be as successful as they think they should be, because they and even those times, by the way, when they do achieve and attain successes, which they do, it tends to not be sustainable because it hasn't really been built on the proper foundation. So when you can be a go-getter, but the focus is on the giving part, the focus is on bringing value to others, that's when, people, they know you, they like you, they trust you, they want to do business with you. And really what it comes down to is that in the business sense, money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning, which simply means the focus must be on the giving of value to others. The money you receive is simply a very natural result of the value you've provided.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So very well said. I like the lightning and the thunder and how that echoes. For years I've said the more value you bring, the more valuable you become. And I think that one of the reasons why you want to be a go-getter and why we call ourselves achievers in this community is because that's how you grow, right? By having experiences and getting out there. And, in Silicon Valley, they used to say, fail first, fail fast, fail often, because they looked at failure as feedback so that you could grow. And it's not feedback that, I failed, so there's something wrong with me and now I'm bad. It's a whole different mindset.
Right.
And so we're developing this growth mindset. And so I love that you said that. In fact, I was listening to one of your interviews a while ago, and I think you had attributed this to Jeff Shurr, possibly, that in sales a lot of times people are wanting to provide the solution before they've even figured out what the problem is.
Right. Yeah, that's Jeff Shurr, who's one of the greatest sales trainers and sales practitioners ever. I mean, he's just so fantastic.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And you can't diagnose without first understanding the issue. And you can only understand the issue when you focus enough on them to ask them the appropriate questions and then listen.
Yeah. You got to care enough to want to find out instead of just trying to get to the sale and close it, because then that's more about you instead of creating the win-win. So,
and of course, the paradox is the more you focus on them, the better they feel about you, the more they trust you, and the more they're likely to do business with you. So so the whole go-giver philosophy, Tim, is not some kind of self-sacrificial martyrish type of thing by any means. Okay. It's congruent with your values of wanting to bring value to other human beings, but it also happens to be the most profitable way of doing business.
Yeah. I really believe that the making it about yourself is the martyrdom. That's the underlying unconscious drive that life's not fair and I deserve it. And if I don't go take it, then I'll never get it. And so you're coming from scarcity. Right. And so you just have, when people act that way, they're wounded. And so because they're not coming from a place of abundance. And because I've met many people, and I'm sure you have too. I know you have certification programs and all kinds of things that you offer. And I'm sure that you would agree that so many people are afraid of letting go because, or when I was going and working with companies, HR directors would feel threatened that I was going to come in there and make them look bad. Right. And so instead of looking at this as an opportunity for us to flourish, so many people start to get held back. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing a training, even with whether you're working with a company or you're doing certifying coaches, what are some of the obstacles that get in their way from becoming a go-giver?
Well, I think with anyone, it's probably, and as you mentioned, and you do such a great job in teaching this, it's about the unconscious, and it's seeing the world in a way that really isn't very truthful, but that the world gives us these messages. Randy Gage, who you may be familiar with Randy's work, he's probably the one of the main prosperity teachers in the world today, and he does this great vignette about movies, the top movies, there. It's funny. He did one about the Titanic and the negative messages, the mind viruses, as he calls them, the memes that were in that sort of the memes of lack. And he talks about them, and it's so true. If you watch a big hit movie, you'll always see there are basically two types of characters. Okay, there are the good people who are typically portrayed as being poor. They're the underdog. They're poor, but they're happy, right?
Yeah, right.
And they're always kind of picked on, stepped around, pushed over, but by who? The rich people, who are always portrayed as being greedy and horrible and have no soul, and they're cowardly.
Evil wealthy people.
He gives a great example in the first Spider-Man movie years ago. Peter Parker was talking with his Uncle Ben, his gentle Uncle Ben. And Uncle Ben says to him, "Well, Peter, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest." Oh, what a horrible message that is to give to kids watching something like that, and so there's all sorts. And so it goes back to when you say, what's the problem, what is the biggest challenge we have to get through? And this is why we have law number 5, the law of receptivity, because we also want people to know that it's not a matter of just breathing out, right? Breathing out is giving, and that's a wonderful thing. But we also breathe in.
Yeah.
Okay. And the biggest challenge I think a lot of people have, and it goes to two things. When they hesitate to breathe in, when they hesitate to receive after all the value they've provided, and again, you know this better than I do because this is your expertise, it's typically some sort of lack. It's a lack of feeling you deserve that abundance. You don't feel worthy, or you've gotten messages in the past that have said, "Oh, if I get rich, now I'm a bad person. Now I'm like Mr. Potter of in the It's a Wonderful Life," right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. That's one issue. But then you go to the say, well, what about the people who just don't buy this idea of, well, be a go-giver, focus on the other person? That stuff doesn't work. Well, why would they think that doesn't work? Because again, they've been brought up to, and they've had the messages from around them that says, oh, only the ruthless and the horrible and the powerful, I remember when I was a kid, I'm older than you are, you may or may not remember the old TV show Dallas.
Sure. Yeah, with JR.
J.R. Ewing was the villain we love to hate, right? Yeah. And he was very wealthy, and he was horrible and greedy and ruthless. Right. Now, there are all types of people in the world. So, of course, you're going to get some that are that way. And when you're brought up to think those are the people who get wealthy, and then you see a J.R. Ewing, or you see the bank where they had their people selling pushing for people to open new accounts when they didn't need it. Try that, whatever it was. And you see well, now your cognitive bias sets in. Oh yeah, well, I always knew that was a thing. And now, so we hear about Enron, we hear about Tyco, we hear about the banks, we hear about this. Well, see, that's exact. But in the basically free market economy in which we operate, okay? So I'm not talking about cronyism where special interests and big, through their lobbyists, they pay for special favors from their politicians. No, most of us operate in an environment which is more free market, which means no one has to buy from us, okay? The only way that we can get wealthy is by providing immense value to people who have agreed to buy from us. Okay. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. Okay. So are they more likely, and this is what I would say to someone who has that, well, but you've got to be really, you've got to care about yourself and just care about, getting their money. That's the only way. And I would say, if you're the prospect and I'm the salesperson, and you can tell that my major goal in this meeting is to transfer your money into my bank account, how likely are you to buy from me? And, if they're going to be honest, they're going to say not very likely. I say, okay, now what if I'm the salesperson and you can tell that my overarching goal is to provide value to you, which means that manifests itself through my asking questions, listening. When you have an objection, it means I take the time to really clarify what that objection is so that we can both work through it together. I determine what it is you want, need, and desire, what problems you're trying to solve, and only at that point do I match the benefits of my product or service with what you're looking to accomplish. Are you more likely or less likely to buy from me right now? And most will say, well, more likely. And so we simply have to, with someone who has that kind of reason for kind of not taking on that go-giver, if you will, mindset, it's just explaining to them why in the real world, okay, not the outliers, not the ones you read about on TV or see on TV, read about in the papers or the internet that do those horrible things, but it's those people who sustainably attain massive success. This is how they do it.
Yeah, beautifully put. So it's just a matter of
Education.
building that foundation, that relationship, right? So that you build trust, right? So that people know that you're not just there for a sale, you're there for a relationship, right? Which of course then building those sales and over a long period of time, I forget what they call it, the lifetime value of your customer. You can close one sale, right, and then tick somebody off, and then it's done or over, and you get all the backlash from it.
Right.
Or you can cultivate the relationship, and you have the lifetime value, which will make you 10 times wealthier.
Yeah, and part of that lifetime value is the referrals and introductions that they'll give you, that those people all have their lifetime value, including the referrals and introductions that you receive that way. And that's how you begin building an army of personal walking ambassadors. And that's also when your business becomes a lot more fun, a lot less stressful, and a lot more profitable.
Now, I hope everybody just heard what Bob said. So make sure you rewind this 30 seconds and listen again, because he literally wrote the book on the subject with endless referrals. And so the fact that you got to hear him say it right then and there, you can take that to the bank. That's money in the bank. So, because when you're creating friendships everywhere you go, then people want to send you business. Because they know they like you, they trust you, and they know you're going to take care of their people, and then that's going to make them look good. Right?
Exactly.
So it makes a big difference. So let me ask you then, I'm assuming I know the answer already. I'm very cautious of assumptions because most of the time our assumptions are false. But were you born a go-giver, or did you had to learn to become one?
I was fortunate that my parents were that way. And still are. And, it's not a term I would have used because it's not a term I knew, but I always saw them always looking to bring value to other people, whether it was personally and business, just always. So I had a wonderful example to learn from.
Yeah, that's really important. So, sometimes we get lucky and we have parents that are emotionally mature and grounded and can show by example and lead by example. So many, though, end up, like for me, for example, I grew up having all kinds of anxiety, worry, fear. One of the biggest dis-eases on the planet is insecurity, right? That deep down fear that I'm not enough. And because I'm not enough, I won't be loved. And so what do I got to do psychologically, unconsciously to get the love, right? To get the validation, to get the approval. And then that's when we let our fear, our vanity, our greed, all those other things, or us becoming a martyr. Right, and being taken advantage of, or never taking action, and then always just complaining about it. That's where all those things kick in. And so there's always a reason for everything we do. And even if it intellectually doesn't make sense, emotionally it makes a lot of sense once you figure it out. And the good news is, of course, we can upgrade that, right? Yeah. And you're teaching people how to do that, and I've been doing that too. We spent our whole lives, doing that. But I did not start out as being others focused. Right. I definitely, because of my worry, because of my fear, I thought I was somebody who was very caring. I mean, even in my 20s and 30s, I'm out there, I'm helping people for a living. Right. I'm doing it for offering all this counseling and coaching and helping people my specialty was post-traumatic stress and helping people overcome trauma. And so I'm doing all this good work. but there was always strings attached. There was always, I'm doing this so that they're good, but so that I can be good too, right? And not from a place of relaxation and abundance. It was more a place of fear, that I was, something bad was going to happen otherwise. And so I'm wondering, I'm sure that comes up regularly when you're talking to people, because it sounds good, this philosophy of helping others, it makes sense, but I still feel tight inside. I still feel this, I'm afraid to do it. What if someone takes advantage of me? What if someone steals my stuff? I hear a lot of authors say that. What if I write a book and they just steal my stuff? I'm like, let them. Let them. Most of what you're writing probably isn't that groundbreaking or original anyway. You're just putting your own spin on it. So how might you help somebody pass through some of that resistance?
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's very natural. And by the way, while I was, brought up with a great example, it certainly doesn't mean that I didn't grow up with my anxieties and my, my issues within myself. But again, very lucky to have the parents I had, and that's certainly a great, start and a fantastic advantage. But yeah, I mean, I certainly have had to go through my own issues as well. I think most of us have, and some can be very devastating, and you kind of live your life and you don't always overcome them. Sometimes you work within them, right? And you work as effectively as you can with them. On the topic of the abundance versus the scarcity, it is a tough one. But you got to sort of, and I think what happened with me is at a certain point, and I would say I was probably in my early 30s before this happened, because I was always wanting to control everything that happened and thinking that I could, and that put a lot of stress. It gets you really tired to think that you're the general manager of the world. And
that's where half my hair went.
And I finally knew that wasn't working for me and that I had to get rid of that. Now, let's also, though, I don't want to go in the direction of saying, oh, that means you don't do the best you can to protect yourself or care about yourself. I want to make sure people know, because especially with a title like the Go-Giver, I think this can sometimes be misconstrued. Being a go-giver is not in any way congruent with simply allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. It's not about being a doormat or being, again, a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. But when you live from a point of abundance, you're actually less likely to get taken advantage of. Because you live your life in a way that's very positive. You tend to attract more of the people into your life who also have that kind of, and again, that doesn't mean that you don't pay attention. You know what I'm saying? It's fun. And so if there's someone who you need to work with who maybe doesn't have that same kind of mentality, now someone might say, well, just don't work with them. Well, that's fine. But sometimes in the real world, we need to work with them. Sometimes it's part of a bigger thing, or sometimes
we have a choice. Sometimes that's right.
Sometimes we don't. You don't have to stop working with them, but you also don't need to allow yourself to be taken advantage of. You continue to work from a viewpoint of prosperity. Okay. You still focus on providing value to them, but you also don't set yourself up to be taken advantage of as well. I often say to people, if, when someone says, oh, this person's so nice, he's always being taken advantage of. And what I say is, no, if a person's nice and they're constantly being taken advantage of, and I don't mean once or twice, we're all going to get taken advantage of sometimes. It's part of living life. The only way not to is to never do anything, right? But I'm talking about when it's a pattern for someone. Okay, then it tends to be, and that it tends to be something unconscious that we're allowing. So I said, if you are a nice person and you're finding yourself as a pattern being constantly taken advantage of, it's not because you're a nice person. It's because you're doing things in a certain way that allow you to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Outstanding. That's so good. So good. I'm so happy that you shared that, because it's such a powerful distinction, because people think that being nice and not setting up boundaries or being assertive is the same thing.
Right.
It's not. You can be very nice. I mean, I had to learn how to do that. I had two different gears. I was really nice, or I'm trying to figure out a non-cuss word, but I was not a nice person. I would get stressed and then I would get angry, right? Or I would try to use my smarts as a defense and kind of tear into you, and neither one of those was, that wasn't good.
No.
So,
it's like, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead. Well, I just had to learn how to, to realize that you can be nice and assertive and set boundaries. And that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're aggressive or mean.
Right.
It just means that you're being nice to other people and to yourself, and respecting yourself at the same time. And that's what you've been saying about respect others and yourself. It doesn't have to be an either or. It should be an and conversation.
Exactly. Right on. Brilliantly said. Exactly.
Yeah. So awesome. All right. Well, then, I talk a lot about blind spots in my profession. And when we were talking before we started doing this program, you had mentioned unconscious biases. And so I love helping people become more self-aware, because that's the only way they can really change. And I had a coach that told me once, he says, you can't see the label when you're in the bottle. You've got some outside feedback in order to really grow. And so are there telltale signs where our listeners, or those that are watching our program right now, is there a way for them to know if they're leaning a little bit more on being self-focused more than others focused? Did I say that correctly?
No, you did. You said that perfectly.
Okay.
I think it's like this, and it goes back in a sense to when we talk about any kind of confirmation bias, right? That we can tell when it's there, when something suggested that we ordinarily wouldn't agree with, that we get defensive about.
Defensiveness.
When we feel that kind of feeling before we even listen to what really is being said, that as soon as there's that tinge of that person saying something, there's a defensiveness. Okay.
Yeah.
Then, we kind of, so if you take this now to how do we know if we're being I focused or other focused, because we would say, the big thing is moving from an I focus or me focus to that other focus. Okay. So how do you really know if that's you? Well, many people will say is, oh, I'm very other focused. I'm always, looking out for them. But
that's
are they really? Right. Well, I think we all go through that. So I think it's then, having someone who you trust ask you some questions, and then, how do you feel as you're answering them? Do you feel kind of defensive about it, or do you, and by the way, that doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it gives you cause to think. One thing I would say, it's like when people say, well, but, because the first law is the law of value, which really talks about your focus on bringing value to others. Value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. What is it about that thing, this product, service, concept, idea, that brings so much worth to someone that they would, okay, now. So, but here's the question. People often say, but I always do bring value to people, but nothing happens in return. They don't seem to appreciate it. Well, remember, value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not about what you feel is of value. It's not about what you feel they should feel is of value. It's about what they feel is of value. So when you're giving value to someone, is it from your point of view or is it from theirs?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a key.
Oh, another nugget. That's golden nugget. That's outstanding. Yeah, I would talk about it in this way. They would say the golden rule: treat others the way you want to be treated, but not really. I call it the platinum rule: treat others the way they want to be treated, right? And the only way you find out what they want is through getting to know them and asking those questions. And everything we do is really to keep the conversation going. And so I just love how you frame that, Bob. And so just to summarize it real quick for everybody that's with us on this, if you start to feel tight inside, if you start to feel defensive, that can be a red flag to let you know, right? So if you care what happens to the person after the sale is done, right? If you're taking time to follow up or check in or send a note, a handwritten note or a quick email or something, so that they know that you care about them after the sale. Because closing the sale, think of it as only, maybe step 2, right? And there's more steps that come after that. So now, also for everybody listening, Bob referred to 2 laws in his book, and he has 5 of them in the Go Giver book that are really good. You want to just name what the laws are, and then they can they can go read the book and learn a little bit more about what each law means.
Sure. Well, we talked a little bit about the first law, which is that really focus on giving value in such a way that their experience makes it so that it's much greater what they receive than what they paid for. Okay. In other words, they feel as though they receive much more in value than what they paid for, while of course you make a very, very healthy profit. So
now, what's the name of that law?
That's the law of value.
The law of value.
Yeah.
So now, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The second law is the law of compensation. And this says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number one says give more in value than you take in payment, which again, simply means that you're giving such a wonderful experience that person feels so great about it, it's worth more. They say to themselves, wow, that was worth everything I paid for it and much more. Right? While you make a healthy profit. Law number two says the more people whose lives you touch with that exceptional value, the more money with which you'll be rewarded. So where law number one is about the value itself, the foundational principle, law number two is all about the number of lives you impact with that value. Yes. Law number three is the law of influence. And this says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Again, not in a self-sacrificial way at all. It's simply understanding the basic, what I call the law of the golden rule of business. And that is all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus to that other focus. Or as Sam, one of the mentors in the first story, told Joe, it's making your win all about the other person's win. Mm. And when you do that, that's when people, boy, they're out there, they have your back because they understand that you've got theirs and that you're rooting for them and that your desire is for them to achieve. Law number four is the law of authenticity. And this one says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And in the story, one of the mentors, Deborah, had shared a very important lesson she learned, and that is that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they all are very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. But when you do, when you show up, as we like to say, as yourself, day after day, week after week, month after month, well, people feel comfortable with you, right? They feel safe with you. They know you, they love you, they trust you. They're much more likely to want to be in a relationship with you, much more likely to trust you with, in terms of referring to people they care about. And so, in order to show up authentically, that also has to do with the unconscious, because, sometimes we don't show up authentically, not because of any ill intent, but just because we may not feel that we have enough value or worth to show up authentically with, and it's difficult when you don't really feel that you're worthy. You were mentioning that earlier, and that's a big challenge with people. And, one thing that, because I believe there are two types of authentic value that we have. One is intrinsic value, and that's just a matter of, you're alive, you're a human being, you bring value to the table. Yeah. But the other type is what I call market value. Mm. And I define market value as that combination of strengths, traits, talents, and characteristics that allows a person to bring value to the marketplace in such a way that they will be financially rewarded for it. And we all have this market value, but they tend to be different for different people. We have different strengths. It's difficult, though, sometimes to recognize and embrace those strengths when either first you've been told you don't have value or don't have strengths, but also because as human beings, as we all see the world from our own perspective, from our own set of beliefs and belief systems and experiences. So if someone is very proficient at a certain skill, let's say, or a certain trait, they may come by it somewhat naturally, but they've also really worked hard at it, but it's become really a part of them. They don't necessarily realize that it's special, because to them, that's just what they do. So everybody can do that, right? Of course, everybody. Well, who wouldn't? But that's not necessarily true. And that's why having someone like yourself, and, you know, when you go into companies and you do this, and, you know, you can help an entire team to realize that they have so much more about them that is special than they even realize. But so while we need to understand our weaknesses as well, we also need to understand our strengths. And often when we can lead with those strengths, that's when we have the confidence to approach things in a very authentic way.
So good. So good, Bob. Yeah, that's really good. You know, early on in my speaking career, I had an Uncle Donnie. And Uncle Donnie, when I was a kid, would come over and, you know, and he would tell me dirty jokes. And I just felt so included when he would do that, right? And then, because he'd be the dads, and then he's like, Tim, come over here, you know. And the way he told the joke was better than the joke every single time, right? And so when I started speaking, I would go out there and I would imbue Uncle Donnie. So I would be all crazy and, you know, and doing all Tony Robbins stuff, and people loved it, right? I mean, I won awards for it. And then, but I would have people later that I would say, what'd you learn? And they'd be like, oh, I don't know. I love your energy. But they never learned anything. And I would have people say that it's fun, but they were giving me honest feedback that it felt like I was just putting on the show. And so I had a trainer that helped me to learn how to go within, let go of those insecurities, emotionally heal and grow. And then, and I went back in and I started, I remember going to the same event the next year, and I gave a talk where I wasn't bouncing around, and I was just trying to just be relaxed and be authentic and be myself. And I had somebody, he was actually a Boston cop, and he walked up to me afterwards and he says, you know, last year I saw you bouncing around. I didn't like you. He says, but this year it felt like you were talking to me and every other person in that room. And I want to know what changed. And I told him that it was the trying to be others focused and not just putting on the show. So, and now I think as I'm going circle, now I'm coming back to bringing some of that, trying to create some of that fun and craziness as I start to turn 50. I want to bring some of it back, but in a new way, you know. So.
You know, though, you brought up a really magnificent point, and that is that we can learn from everyone. Okay, we can learn from Tony Robbins, we can learn from Uncle Donnie, we can learn from my friend Dondi Scumaci, we can learn from Andrea Waltz, we can learn from everyone. Okay,
yeah,
but we can learn, and we should adapt their wisdom. Yeah. Just we don't want to adopt their personality. Okay. Ooh, so nice. Yeah, we adapt.
Don't try to be them.
Right. Exactly.
So trying to be the next Bob Burg. No, be you. Right. Be yourself.
Or the next Tim, or the next Tony, or the next Andrea, or the next. We can't. You know, right. We can be. You know, I could do a great imitation of Zig Ziglar because he was one of my favorite speakers, and I listened to his audios all the time. I could imitate him as far as the words, and I've done that from stage before. Yeah. But I wouldn't ever try to be Zig Ziglar. I learned a ton from Zig Ziglar, but I couldn't try to be Zig. It wouldn't work. I'm not Zig.
Right. Yeah. We already have a Zig.
Exactly.
A Bob. Right.
Well, I think we need a Zig more than a Bob, but nonetheless, it's you know, it's something where, you know, we can learn from everyone. The sages said, "Who is wise?" and answered, "That person who learns from all others." So, you know, again, adapt their wisdom. Don't adopt their personality. Learn from them, but be always congruent with your authentic core.
That's beautiful. All right, so I'm going to shift with a question here, and I'll tell you why I always ask this. People often will see all the success you've had and traveling around and being a big fancy speaker and selling all the millions of books and all that stuff. And some people like me will be inspired and be like, wow, this is exciting, and let's see what's possible, and let's learn from Bob. But there was a time where myself or others would also be like, you know, there's no way that I could do that, right? And all the self-doubt comes out, or the jealousy or the envy. So I like to ask people, what's something that a mistake that you've made, or something where you just totally blew it, you know, so that it shows that you're human and vulnerable like everybody else. So is there something in your life that you learned from and you're like, that was a big learning for me and this is how I've used it moving forward?
Well, first, I mean, too many to count. I mean, I've had many, really, I mean, I've had many more failures than I've had successes.
I just love your
And,
honesty. That's so important.
uh, well, thanks. But I mean, I think pretty much, anyone will tell you that. I mean, who hasn't? I mean, you can't get anywhere significant without failing a whole bunch.
Yeah.
But one of the big mistakes I made was it was kind of like more toward the late 90s.
Mhm.
And I had really built up a very successful at that time speaking practice.
Mhm.
But things were starting to shift into the internet now. This is where it was starting to really kind of, and I'm basically a technophobe. If I can possibly avoid technology, which is interesting because now I'm on technology all the time, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
At the time, I just said, I'm not going to do this internet stuff. First of all, being the wonderful forecaster I am, I said this internet thing will never really catch on anyway. But I just, I said, well, I have enough business and enough clientele who are loyal to me. I don't have to. It wasn't true at all.
Yeah, I don't have to evolve and grow.
That was exactly it. Okay, and so I was happy where I was, and my business crumbled. I really got left behind. I had one really big client, which we know we should never depend on, right?
Yes.
And but things were good. Things were rolling, and this technology thing wasn't something I was going to do. I had, a great business here, but especially this big client. This was like, that crumbled, and so did the rest of it. And I really had to restart my business from ground zero. It was a big mistake. Now, so the issue there was, well, I didn't want to change. And, part of the, what I call the political correctness of the personal development movement, which I kind of hopefully respectfully call out a little bit, is that things that are uncomfortable, you're supposed to like, oh, no, it's great. Change is great. Well, I hate change.
Change
I
is
don't
hard.
think change is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
The changes that you enjoy are great.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But here's the thing. You don't have to enjoy it. You don't have to like the fact that it's there to know that you have to still evolve with it. Okay. And it's like when people say, oh, when something really horribly bad happens and people say, well, I'm glad that happened. I like when that because it makes me. No, bad things stink.
Yeah.
We should not be rooting for it, and we shouldn't be happy about it. Okay. Now, can we learn from it? Absolutely. Can we turn that into something much better down the line? Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we don't have to like everything that happens. Now, some people do love change, and God bless them. I'm glad, But with me, no, that wasn't a thing. But what I learned was it didn't matter. You've got to be wise enough to know there are some things that are going to change with or without you. And if you want to be successful, you're going to have to find a way to do it successfully. So that was, I'd say, my biggest mistake. But again, that's one of many mistakes, So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So many truths in there, and I haven't talked to anybody that has been really successful who hasn't also lost it or almost lost it, a few times, because you live on that cutting edge, and that's how you grow. A lot of times our biggest growth spurts have some pain to go with it, and that pain is what keeps the wisdom, and it allows you to hang on to it. So your brain will keep it if it hurts enough. So, not many people out there can say that they're a Hall of Fame speaker and all that. So from traveling around and having those experiences, what's something that you've learned from that? Taking us behind the curtain. What's something that you've experienced, or a couple of things that you picked up from being able to go and do that?
Well, I think the more you can learn about your client, when you're going to speak on stage, the more you can learn about them and really inculcate yourself, within their culture, really understand the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threat, the whole thing. The more prepared you're going to be, the more prepared you are, the more confident you're going to be. But it also allows you to place your focus on them. great speaking, if you will, is never about the speaker. It's always about the audience, and it's always about the connection. And that's something that you saw, that you learned, that you beautifully took into your own life, and so forth. So I think that's the biggest thing about speaking. Once the speaker thinks it's about them, and they start believing their own press and their own introductions and their own, then they think they lose their effectiveness pretty big time.
That's a great answer. So I remember reading a book, I can't remember the name of it now, but someone was talking about how amateur speakers will often, their introduction will be basically a biography, right? And he says that if you really want to make an impact immediately, talk about what the audience is about to get, and make it about them, even with your introduction, because you already have credibility because you're on the stage. Right? And if you feel like you still have to have that, then you're making it about you, and you're not really being a go-giver. So that's really good. I found that I was pretty good with that. The thing I had issues with is I had to learn how to make sure that I knew how to work the clicker. Because there'd be one too many times I get on stage and I'm like, how come this isn't advancing my slide?
Yeah, I'm still one of the few that doesn't use overheads or
really
PowerPoint. So, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's really a gift, because too many people are reliant on their PowerPoints, and that was something that I learned too. I use it more like for a bullet point, so I just have a picture with a funny thing on there. Yeah, just to arouse the audience more than anything else. Because I watched Brian Tracy a couple years ago, and he had the same PowerPoint that he had like 30 years earlier when I had seen him. And so, I think that's cool, because you really got to know your stuff in order to not have to fall back on a PowerPoint. So yeah, that's impressive.
Brian's such a master. It's funny about Brian. He also happens to be one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. But it's interesting. One of my favorite Brian Tracy stories was it had to be, I'd say, midnight, and I was heading back after a kind of an extended trip, and I looked like a mess. I mean, I was, everything was wrinkled, and 2 days growth or whatever it was. One day, I guess, because I'd spoken that day, and I'm coming back, and I see Brian Tracy, and it's the same 12 o'clock for him, right? He was immaculate.
Yeah.
The guy's perfectly. Somehow he looks clean shaved. His suit seemed pressed.
Yeah.
How do you? We had a cup of coffee. We're both going to our different gates. So how do you do that? I don't remember what he said, but the guy has so much wisdom, and he was really just he's such a nice guy. But boy, I still to this day, when I think of Brian, I think of that story. How did he look that good? That pressed, his suit pressed, at 12 midnight after a thing. But funny.
Yeah, he's a very, very impressive guy. The most exciting things, how do I say this? It's really exciting when you meet somebody and they're as authentic and cool as you want them to be. Like you're very, how people see you and how they read your books and how, the rumors that they hear about you. And then when I'm talking to you and stuff, it's a match, right? You're just got a great reputation as a really, really great guy. And so Brian, I haven't met him, but from what you've said, seems like he's that way too. I did meet Zig Ziglar, and he was just, oh my gosh, to the core.
Amazing. Just fantastic. We, years ago, my business partner, Kathy, and I used to put on big events, yearly events. We'd have, some of the world's top speakers and so forth. Well, we had Zig come in. We were giving him the Go-Giver of the Year award. And Zig had the last couple of years of his life, he, I don't know if he had a head injury, and he suffered short-term memory loss. And so his daughter, Julie, would often be on stage with him to help kind of guide him along when he'd forget something. And it was very sad, but it was very inspiring seeing Zig do that. And that was a choice Zig made to do that, even after he, lost that kind of short-term memory, which speaks volumes of him. But that, when we had him come up, his son, Tom, was on stage with him, who's just a wonderful guy. And Mrs. Ziglar was on stage, and she told me after that was the only time she's ever been. with Zig. Yeah, the redhead.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
That's huge.
And, it was. But afterwards, the Ziglers sat down and they were signing autographs and talking with people. The highlight of the event, and I got emails from so many people who attended, was they're getting to meet Zig and his family, of course, Mrs. Ziegler and Tom. And all the Ziglers were just totally warm and wonderful, and they were just beautiful. They were just the nicest, sweetest people. You know, so it was really just a wonderful thing. And I'd had the opportunity to meet them. Well, I had not met Mrs. Ziegler, but Zig and Tom. But so I knew. But you know, I mean, they really just sat there for hours and just talked for as long as people wanted to talk with them, and couldn't have been any sweeter. So that was just a nice.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story. All right, I got one more question. Well, two more questions for you, because I know that your time is valuable, and so we'll wrap this up here, because I could ask you questions all day long. So, but then you start charging me for it, which would still be worth it. So,
well, you could charge me since you're a speaker too. So, you know, we're giving each of these speakers, you know,
we're both winning here. Right? We're both winning.
Well, thank you. Very nice of you to say.
So there was a sentence that you had in one of your media kits, and it said, you say that there is one sentence that is guaranteed to prevent a misunderstanding. What is that?
Yeah, this actually, it's within the context of belief systems, where we talk about, you know, we look at the world from a certain way, and most misunderstandings or any kind of conflict is based on two or more people seeing the same basic thing from their own individual viewpoints, not realizing that the other person's not seeing it the same way as they are. So just as an example, let's say there's a corporate small team, okay, and the team leader takes everyone aside on Monday morning and says, hey, there's new news about the project you've been working on. There's another deadline with another client. We need to get everything. Just, I need this new project information in as soon as possible, okay? And everybody goes, okay. Now, Wednesday afternoon, end of day, the project manager calls everybody and says, hey, I don't have your work in yet. I only have one person's work in. Where is it? You know, well, that one person, when he heard as soon as possible, well, to him, he's been working with the team leader, Patty, for a long time. He knows that when Patty says as soon as possible, she means within a couple of days. Tom, who was from another division within the company, was with a team leader who, when they said as soon as possible, it meant, yeah, get your stuff done that you need to do and then go do it. And then Stephanie came from another company where as soon as possible meant nothing. Just give it lip service and keep doing what you're doing. So you had the term as soon as possible, and you had three different definitions, right? So what would you say in order to make sure that didn't happen? One of the people on the team could have said, Patty, just for my own clarification, that's the tact part, where you know, just for my own clarification, when you say as soon as possible, is there a specific day or time you're thinking of? And then she would have said, yes, I need it by the end of day Wednesday, you know, by 5 o'clock. Now you've got everyone on the same page and there's no misunderstanding. So the basic question you would ask that would just simply be to have people define their terms. Tom, just to make sure I don't mess things up, or just to make sure we're on the same page, or just for my own clarification, when you say X, what exactly, or is there a, you know what I'm saying? And that's how we would do that to make sure. Now we might say, well, why didn't Patty, the team leader, say that from the beginning? I don't know. Why do people sometimes not communicate correctly? We haven't been taught to. And right. So as long as we know that we should never, and we were talking about assuming earlier, that we should never assume that the way we define a term is the way someone else defines a term, we can always make sure to check our premises and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's funny that you use that example, because I was doing a program this morning, and it was on the exact example about what ASAP means. and how to set it.
Really?
You know? Yeah,
That's funny.
Synchronicity, right? And so, and I had a friend, I have a friend, JB Simons, and he was a Navy SEAL. And he said that you would get a team of 6. And the way he would say it is, how come a team of 6 can disrupt a team of 30 to 40? You know, and I like how I use the word disrupt. But anyway, he says it was clarification. He says it was everybody's duty and obligation. And if someone asked for clarification, then there was no defensiveness. No one felt weird about it. It was like, absolutely, because then everybody knows
life and death for them. They have to be. Imagine for someone to give an order with a SEAL team and not totally clear regarding the mission. It could be deadly.
Yeah, it would be. So, but you gave people the language, because a lot of times people just don't have the language patterns. They don't know what to ask, right? People don't know what they don't know. So when you said, just for my own clarification.
Right. That's the I message that kind of puts the onus on you instead of making them feel defensive.
So good. So good. Bob, this has been a delight. So people can go and find all the stuff that you have on thegogiver.com. Is there anywhere else? I mean, you can find his books wherever books are sold. He has all kinds. Are you still doing Facebook stuff or things like that? You doing any Facebook Lives or?
We'll be picking those back up again. We've put the podcast and Facebook Live aside for a while. We've been working on a very, very big project, an online course called Endless Referrals, The Go-Giver Way.
Oh, nice.
We've been working on this for a long time, and we finally did the taping of it, which took 4 entire days. And now we're in post-production, so we should have that out hopefully soon. And then I'll start getting back to doing some of the ancillary programs again, which is a lot of fun.
Well, congratulations on that project, because I know it's an extraordinary amount of work. And in 4 days of filming, I mean, that's a lot. And so I'm sure it's going to be an outstanding program like all your other stuff is. So, well, Bob, thank you so much. I'll make sure that for everybody that's listening or watching this, I'll make sure we have the links for everything that Bob has to offer, because it's obvious from hanging out with him today, he has a gold mine of wisdom and tools that will help you to be a go-giver and a go-giver influencer. So, and you know, make sure you sign up for his program so that you too are developing and generating endless referrals. So, Bob, thanks so much for being a part of our show today. You've absolutely been one of my favorite mesmerizing guests, and I appreciate you being here.
That's a great compliment. Thank you. And thank you again for everything you do.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everybody. You know, Bob and I would just be here having a wonderful conversation, but our goal is to give you mesmerizing tips and tools, and so we value you so much. If it wasn't for you, then this really wouldn't matter. And so thanks so much for being mesmerizing. Make today a sure success, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, would you like more free tips on how to be a mesmerizing leader? Then check out mesmerizingleadership.com and also hang out with me on Facebook, facebook.com/Tim Shurr. Thanks so much, and make your day a sure success.